Hi, this is Peter Schiff. It's Tuesday, July 7th, 2009. Well, today the Dow Jones closed below the neckline of the head and shoulders top pattern I've been talking about the last couple of video blogs. The neckline was 8,200. We closed around 8,160. The projection, the minimum downside projection of the head and shoulders top is Dow 7,500. And I certainly think the odds favor, at this point, a move in the Dow down to 7,500. Whether we ultimately go on and challenge the March lows from earlier this year, it's hard to say. I have a good feeling that we might, especially if we take out the 7,500 and move closer to 7,000. It certainly looks like those lows are in danger of at least being tested, if not being breached. Maybe I think people are starting to finally realize that the green shoots are not as green as people thought, or in fact are already withering and dying. And there is a lot of talk right now about the need for a second stimulus. And I expect that, that talk to grow, and I expect a second stimulus to come. But of course, the first stimulus was unnecessary. Not only was it unnecessary, it's counterproductive. The economy is suffering from an overdose of government stimulus. The stimulus is the problem. The stimulus stimulates all the things that are wrong with the economy while inhibiting all the things that we need to make the situation right. The stimulus simply encourages more reckless borrowing and spending and prevents the economy from rebalancing in a healthy way. Now, maybe in the short run, there is an artificial boost from the stimulus, but when the effects wear off and the hangover sets in, the problems get worse. And as I've said many times in the past, the more the government stimulates the economy, the worse the problem gets, the worse the economy gets, and the more they want to stimulate it. And it's a self-perpetuating spiral of more stimulus and bigger problems. And there is no connection between the stimulus and the problems. The government simply comes up with the excuse that, well, the problems were really worse than we thought, therefore the stimulus wasn't big enough, and we need an even bigger stimulus. And it never dawns on anybody in Washington that the stimulus is the source of the problems, and that we're never going to have a lasting economic recovery until the government stops stimulating. Another example of government meddling in making the economy worse is coming up later this month when the minimum wage is going to increase. Right now, the minimum wage is $6.65 an hour, and it's scheduled to go up to $7.75, later this month. Now, think about this for a minute. The economy is already suffering. The companies that employ a lot of minimum wage workers are in trouble right now. Remember, the minimum wage workers are generally low-skilled or no-skilled workers. A lot of them are kids. A lot of them are teenagers, people, getting their first job. A lot of these people work at restaurants, in retail, and these businesses are already in a lot of trouble. I mean, they can barely afford the employees they have, let alone hire new ones, and they can barely afford them at the current pay rate. The government wants to mandate that all these businesses that are struggling right now give everybody a raise. What could be stupider than that? I mean, what the government doesn't understand is rather than giving people a raise, they're going to give people pink slips. Because if you make it more expensive to hire people, you hire fewer people. If you make it more expensive to retain your employees, you retain fewer people. You see, the government can't mandate higher wages because they can't mandate higher productivity. And what determines wages is productivity. I'm an employer, and I hire people because I believe that in hiring them, they will make my business more productive. Meaning, if I pay somebody $7.50 an hour, the anticipation is they will generate revenues for my company in excess of $7.50 an hour. In fact, it needs to be quite a bit in excess just to cover the extra costs of hiring people, such as payroll taxes and whatever else I have. And so they need to generate a positive number. I'm not in business to lose money. I can't hire people and pay them more than their productivity. And so what the minimum wage law does is makes it expensive for employers to hire low-skilled wage earners. And in fact, it prices many low-skilled workers out of the market completely and creates unemployment. So what's going to happen is when the government increases the minimum wage from $6.65 to $7.25, everybody's not going to earn $7.25. You're going to have people who are unemployed and who don't earn $7.25, who might have been employed at $6.55. I mean, think about this example. Let's assume that as a businessman, there's a job that I would like to have done by an unskilled worker. And I've determined that the most I can pay is $5 an hour. That at $5 an hour, if an unskilled worker does this particular job, that it's profitable for the business. But if I have to pay $7.50 an hour, I actually lose money. So at $5 an hour, the job is viable. At $7.50 an hour, it can't exist because it would cause me to lose money. Now, what that says is that I can't hire somebody whose labor productivity is only worth $5 an hour. I have to find somebody who's worth $7.50 an hour. So even if there's somebody who's unemployed and would rather be employed at $5 an hour than unemployed at $7.25 an hour, I am legally prohibited from offering him a job, and he is legally prohibited from accepting it. What could be more stupid than that? The government passing a law making it illegal for somebody to work. Now, the liberals try to pretend that, well, you know, people can't live on the minimum wage, that you can't support a family of four on a minimum wage. Well, of course not. Why would somebody expect to be able to support the family of four on a minimum wage? The minimum wage is an entry-level job. It's teenagers get these jobs, people in their young 20s. They don't have families to support. A lot of these people are still living with their parents. What they need is some spending money, some pocket change, and what they need is experience. What they need is to develop skills so that they can become more valuable to their current employer and to future employers. But when you raise the minimum wage, you raise the ladder. You make it more difficult for somebody to get their first job. You know, there are still people in this country that have paper routes, that deliver newspapers. Does anyone believe that a paper boy should earn enough to support a family? Of course not. It's lunacy to say that minimum wage jobs should be supporting families. There's no way that they can. And if the government is simply going to say, well, we're just going to make the minimum wage higher so that people can support their families, they're not going to create more employment. They're going to destroy jobs. I mean, if the minimum wage really worked, if the government could simply mandate higher wages, why $7.25? Why not $10? Why not $25? Why not $100 an hour? I mean, wouldn't everybody benefit if they were earning $100 an hour? Well, the reality is most people would admit that, well, if you mandate $100 an hour, it's going to create a lot of unemployment. And the minute they admit that there is a connection between the rate of unemployment and wages. And obviously, supply and demand works. I mean, it works in all aspects of life. The less something costs, the more I'm going to demand. The more something costs, the less I'm going to demand. If the government increases the price of hiring unskilled workers, I am going to hire fewer unskilled workers. The more expensive it makes me to hire, the government makes it to hire them, the fewer I'm going to hire. And certainly today, when you've got companies that are struggling and they're already losing money, and the government is saying, well, now you're going to lose even more money if you don't fire some people, well, what's the government going to do? There are going to be a lot of layoffs. Now, in the past, when the economy was in better shape and the government increased the minimum wage, it was still creating damage, but it was harder to see because the economy was not as vulnerable. Jobs were still being created, and so even if some were lost due to the increased minimum wage, it was hard to see it. Now the effect is going to be very noticeable and very pronounced, and I think you're going to see an immediate increase in unemployment among the lower skilled. And of course, not only is it going to mean that more people are going to lose their jobs, but it's going to be that much more difficult for the people who do lose their jobs to get other jobs. It's going to make it more difficult for people who lose full-time jobs to get part-time jobs because those jobs are going to be more expensive. This is going to hurt an already weak labor market. You would think that our politicians would at least have the good sense to call this off, to postpone the increase in a minimum wage until a later date. But they want to pretend that this is good, that we're giving people a raise, that the government is helping out. But of course, the people who are going to be most impacted by the minimum wage increase are the very people that our politicians are pretending to be championing and helping out. But that's always how it works in government. Whenever they try to help you, look out, they end up hurting you. That's it for today.